And I'm always curious about what started you on this journey. Was it something that, you were born and you were immediately into the spiritual, esoteric, healing? Very rarely it happens that we're born and we're like, oh, this is my path. Often it is, as you hinted on, with our own journey, with our own experiences. And I would love to know for you to share a little bit of your background on where this journey for you started, what really was a tipping point for you to start your own healing journey, and then learning more about the wonderful modalities, the wonderful experiences that you have to then be able to help yourself and help others. And were there someone else on your journey who helped you? Was it a resource? Was it a person? We're always curious to know about what helped you start it and then what kept you going.
Well, it was 1998 when I was doing Tai Chi, and I was very contracted in my mind and body, and it was wonderful. The Tai Chi started to open up my body, and I didn't realize I wasn't spiritual or aware of anything. And suddenly I started to hear things that weren't there and smell things and feel. It's always been the feeling that has been stronger. And I was really scared by it all and went to see a medium who explained what was happening. So I was getting into astrology and all sorts of things, my love of crystals. But it was actually 2003 that I burnt out as a social worker. So it was great because I'd been eased in to understand more about the different levels of myself until 2003, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't tolerate sound. I couldn't tolerate light. So all I could do was just lay there in bed. And of course, my thoughts were going into what's happening, why me, I can't do this. And it got to the point where I wanted my life to end because I was so desperate. But I didn't even have the energy to do anything about that. So I got deeper into understanding the mind, body, and soul and reached out to some therapists. I couldn't do much at all. It all started with such a small amount and a small amount of time on my healing journey. But it's taught me patience, a lot of patience over, because this was 22 years ago, to allow myself to heal. And so what I changed completely was to lay there, imagining my cells as pebbles and writing on the pebbles, love, healing, energy, and putting it into a lake and all sorts of different things that I'd read or heard about. So it took a long, long time to actually get out of bed and to be able to tolerate anything around me. And that affected me with food as well. I couldn't eat an awful lot of food. My gut was all over the place. So that was the real massive turning point. But because I was still running my old patterns that I didn't really realize what they were, I was an A-type personality. So that's driving yourself hard, wanting to excel at work and everything and being a perfectionist. And so I was still pushing myself. So then I would just go backwards again because I was just trying to do everything really quickly when I couldn't even really get out of bed. So the next turning point was understanding my patterns and my programming. And when I started to understand that actually I'd been created in my mother's womb from her trauma, which was one horrendous event when she was 11, that I could never comprehend at all, that I started to understand that actually I was stuck in hypervigilance and my whole body was contracted and that I was being attracted into mental health social work because it's the trauma. You're there addicted to trauma. It's so interesting. I didn't comprehend that at all. That I just thought that was something that I was meant to be doing, that I was drawn to that career. But burning out was a massive learning curve for me. And even though it was so many years of struggle, I wouldn't have it any other way now because of the deep learning. And I needed that severe shock because I wasn't listening to anything else. As I was gradually becoming more and more unwell, I just kept pushing through that. And I'm sure there's some listeners here who it's resonating with because so many of us do that, especially women when they're juggling a career and family and house and everything else. Not that I had children, but yes, that's what happened. I was so grateful.
Wow, and thank you for sharing. And like you said, we don't always listen. We get these signals and we don't listen. We sort of work through them to keep going, to fulfill our responsibilities or just doing, and we're not actually listening to what our bodies are telling us. And then there's this impact, and it just gets worse and worse until we stop and start to listen. And yeah, I mean, this is something that resonates with me, is the not listening and just keep going, because it's either through ignorance and not realizing what's going on. And as you said, it's you just kept wanting to go and not knowing what's happening. But I think there's also a little bit of fear there, is what is there. And then there comes also this belief that we are not enough or we are broken, but we just got to put this persona on and say, and just show the world that everything is fine. Meantime, we've got this idea of, oh, I'm broken, I'm not enough, what's wrong with me, why me, and just this cycle that we can go into. So I love how you really shared that it is something that I think a lot of our listeners do experience. And I know myself and Lenka, we've had these experiences where we just don't listen, but learning to listen and learning to find what works, what doesn't work, and then with patience. Yeah, patience. That's something that I'm working on and having to deal with. And it's wonderful how you said you wouldn't wish it to be any other way because of what you've learned, because of the journey that you've been on, and it's enabled you to be where you are today and to get you to who you are tomorrow, next week, next year. But this is a process. And I think that is such a powerful tool, is not necessarily regretting is probably not the right word, but not denying what's happened and wishing it gone, but embracing it and learning to bring that into the teachings of yourself, as well as, and then of course you can bring it and help your clients and help people, because you've been on that path before. You understand it in your way, to know what has worked for you and what maybe hasn't worked for you. But it's just finding that path. And I think that is so powerful, is that non-regret and non-wishing it hadn't happened, because I think that is our traumas, our things that have happened, the good and the bad, is all what makes us who we are. And I think when we deny it and when we fight it, that's when it becomes a physical issue or a mental issue. But it's working through it and almost embracing that as part of of who we are can help us to heal and to move forward. So with all that is, once you've started your healing process and once you started to get back onto the physical track, because you said, bedridden, burnout, intolerant to a lot of foods, what sort of showed that you were getting better? How did you know that you were on the right path? Because we try so many different things and we don't always know if it's working. It might not work overnight. As you said, patience and learning, but how did you realize, or what enabled you to realize, hang on a minute, this is working? It might be a little step in a little way, but how did you know or realize, okay, I'm now on the right path and it's working, even though it might feel like it wasn't working? I hope that question sort of makes sense.
Yes. Well, just to put it in the context a wee bit, I was married at the time, and I kept saying to myself that I would leave him when I got better. Because looking back, it was very toxic and he was unsupportive and totally unspiritual and not understanding, bless him, what was going on for me. So that was a massive turning point, but it took a tarot reader to say to me, I've never experienced this before, but your guides are screaming at me to tell you you've got to leave him. And she said, I would never normally say this. But that was just leaving, packing the dog and myself and a few bits in the car and going to my dad's, which was a real healing decision just there. I noticed immediately, just getting out of that environment, the change, it was incredible. But I think when I healed my gut, because the gut is such a key part of us, so many people don't realize when they're eating a lot of junk food. And I was into a lot of sugar because as a social worker, a lot of people were smoking to deal with the stress, black coffees, junk food. My thing was a drawer full of chocolate. So there was a lot of sugar in my system. And I would say that that was a real turning point as well when I turned that corner with my gut, because it's like the foundations, isn't it? Because I realized what I was trying to do was to just leap forward. It was like with my chakras, the 7 main energy centers. I was only focusing on the top ones because I was like, yes, I just want to be spiritual and that'll get me there. And I had to realize I had to go back to the basics and work through from my root chakra upwards. It was like that. It was just getting the foundations of my body. And then I was working on my inner programs, and I trained in 2014 to be a hypnotherapist after seeing a hypnotherapist who just happened to be working just in the next village because I couldn't drive far at all. And she just hired the room from the Reiki healer that I was seeing. She told me, because she was a wellness coach and a hypnotherapist specializing in chronic fatigue, because that was, or ME as it was known then, that was the diagnosis I'd been given. So to this day, it was incredible that she came there and she didn't see anyone else, and then she left. But it was just like this godsend of her being there. And that was another massive turning point. She started doing the hypnotherapy and I sat upright and I said, I've just been told that I'm meant to training this. And she just grinned at me. So sorting out those programs to stop me driving myself, to push myself beyond what I needed to do, and just I was medically retired in the end, and that made me stop and fully heal. But there was so many different things. There were so many gifts that were shown to me that thankfully I received and listened and sort of took forward. It might not have been straight away, but eventually I got there through the gifts and messages and ways forward. And then I trained in inner child therapy in 2015. And that was another massive turning point to go back and to, some people say rescue, but it's basically being there for my younger self, to talk to her, to love her and let her know it's okay. You're safe now. I've got you. Rather than carrying on in the underlying trauma patterns and programs, and then to release the held stress and trauma out of my cells, the issues in my tissues. That was another huge turning point. So yeah, there's a lot of different ones. But I would say they're the massive key ones that thank you wherever all that information came from.